Oh, gosh, I was just starting to think it wasn't going to work at all. It was going round and round and round and round. Thank you, Craig. That's a lovely hashtag. Hello, everyone. Hopefully I sound slightly more normal today. I listened to a little bit of last week's and it would sound like I was on death's door. I understood why everyone was saying I was being very brave, so thank you. Hello, Shell and Andrew. How you going? Hello, Craig and family. Oh, deep fried camembert and cranberry. How yummy. Cotty and John, g'day. Hello, Paul and Roz. Hello, Rob and Deb. I have to admit, hello, Emily and Kevin. I hope I am feeling much better. Thank you, Emily. I'm still having a little afternoon nap, though. I don't know about you, but it's really knocked me around. But yes, getting there. I'm feeling much more like myself again, and I'm back in my normal spot. I was allowed out of jail, and I have to admit, I've had the crack team on just a little bit of a preview taste of this wine to see how my old sense of smell and taste is going. And I reckon it's somewhere between 50 and 75% back. So I'm pretty excited about that too. So everything's looking up, I think. Richard's got his peanuts or cashew nuts or whatever they happen to be. So, you don't have to have fancy food to go with your drinks with Kate. A nice bowl of peanuts works very well. I've had a couple of messages from friends who have gone on holiday and forgot to put their wine in their bag. Sue and Jeff, if you're watching, no excuses. That's just poor organisation. I'm sorry and they're like, oh, we can't find any Moorooduc Estate wine up here in coastal northern New South Wales. It's like, no, you can't. That's correct. There will be some more available as we go. Oh, Cotty, beetroot dip, beetroot and pumpkin risotto and beetroot salad. How delicious. Back from Port Douglas. Oh, Zach and Jack, you're back again. I'm sorry to hear that it was wet while you were there. It doesn't seem like a very good winter to be going north. All that talk about La Nina being over, it doesn't sound like it is for everybody. But anyway, it's been nice here, actually. A little bit of rain today, but we had some lovely sunshine yesterday. I did the invalid thing and sat out in the sun with my blankie over my knee yesterday for a little while, just kind of soaked in the rays. It was really lovely. Hello, Anne. Bacon and mushroom risotto. How delicious. All right, let's get some wine in our glasses. So the Moorooduc McIntyre Pinot Noir 2020. With the duck on the label. We'll get that open and stick it in here. Now, I thought I would decant this. You don't have to. It's quite tight. What I would say, if you are thinking about decanting this wine, is only decant it, as I said in my email, just before you're ready to drink it. So you put it in the decanter and then you put it straight into the glass. So none of this decanting 3 hours ahead of time and waiting for it to open up. You want to see what's happening in the glass right from the beginning. So a little bit of air in it, giving it that quick decant. And then stick your nose in and get all that beautiful. It's so floral, this wine, and I'm so excited. Oh, hello, Sue and Daryl. I am so glad I'm better as well. It's boring being sick. Kay, Capriccio's Pizza, yum, nice. Rob, the Western Pacific is still very warm, hence the rain. Yes, indeed. It's not very good for people who are getting flooded, but it's just kind of what we have to live with at the moment, isn't it? Fire for me in the background, poodles. I got one poodle anyway, the other one's over there. And Craig wants to know, is this the lightest colour of any of our Pinots yet? No, Craig, we have made Pinot that has been even lighter in colour than this. In the very difficult 2011 vintage, the Robinson 2011 Pinot, which we still have a little bit of. Jeremy reckons it's probably falling over now. I'm going to have a look at it when my sense of smell is completely back. But it's probably worth one more look at as a group before it gets too old. And that's a real kind of eye-opener as far as pale colour, very delicate flavours, but still really lovely structure and perfume. So I think that it's a good place to start is why is this wine so pale in colour? And there's a very simple reason. It's because 2020, the ripening period, we didn't get a huge amount of sunshine. So it was cool, but it also was overcast, particularly January, February, in that time where the grapes have gone through veraison and they're ripening, their sugars are ripening and the acids are dropping out and the flavours are developing. If you don't have a lot of sunshine and you don't have a lot of heat during that time, particularly for a grape variety like Pinot Noir, you don't develop those colour, the colour intensity in the skin, because the skin stays quite thin and quite delicate. When you have a sunny summer, then the skins tend to get thicker, and so you get more tannins and more colour in the skin, and you end up with a darker coloured Pinot. It doesn't mean that it's a lesser wine or it's kind of lacking because it's paler in colour, particularly with Pinot Noir. Colour is not an indicator of quality. It's because Pinot Noir is a grape variety that can be quite finicky about taking on colour. And it's a little bit mysterious as well. I was talking to Richard and Jeremy about it today, because usually the McIntyre will have deeper colour, will be darker fruited, and will be a bit denser in its style. And there are a few reasons why the 2020 isn't. That cool but kind of consistent ripening period that we had over the summer was really good for developing flavour, but not so much colour. But also we did pick it slightly earlier than we have in past years, which will also have an effect on the colour and also the fruit profile. So we're seeing in this wine, there's there's more red cherry fruit than you'd often see in the McIntyre Pinot. It's still cherry fruited, but there's not that really kind of dark, brooding black cherry fruit character that we sometimes get in warmer years and years when we've picked the fruit a little bit later, a little bit riper. So I think that's probably a stylistic thing that is evolving with this wine. But I think it also has to do with, I think I mentioned last week, God knows what I talked about last week. I was in a complete daze. But something that I talk about quite a lot about recent vintages, 2020, 21, 22, is that we've become much better at predicting how the grapes are going to ripen when we look at them, and so we're calling our picking date a little earlier, because we kind of look at the fruit and we say, okay, well, this fruit is this ripe now, and by the time we've got the picking team organised and booked in and ready, it's going to be 3 days' time. So with 3 days' time, knowing what the weather's doing and all that sort of stuff, then we're getting better at knowing where that fruit's going to be at when we set the pick date, rather than saying, oh, we should have picked today, but we won't be able to get the pickers to pick until Saturday. So that's 2 extra days, and anything can happen in 2 days. But we're getting better at knowing what could happen in the 2 days and just calling it a little bit earlier. So, excuse me, the cough hasn't gone yet. Just trying to answer people's questions as they come through. Greg and Haley have asked, is there something you always see from McIntyre? And yes, there is, and I'll talk about that in a moment. And I'm still seeing that in this wine, even though it's slightly different in its fruit character from some McIntyres that we've seen in the past. Rob and Deb, any reason for the harvesting tad early given? So we weren't harvesting earlier than usual. We were just harvesting when we want to harvest, rather than saying we should have harvested today, but we won't be able to harvest for another 4 days, because that's when we can get the picking team. We're getting better at booking the picking team ahead of time. So it's about getting it right rather than missing it by a day. Rob and Deb, I think, is probably more of the case. and it wasn't the sunshine. There was less sunshine, but there was plenty of light and enough heat for the grapes to ripen consistently. So it wasn't like we were trying to get more ripeness. The ripeness is perfect here. It's just a slightly different. It's a slightly different shaped wine because of the way the fruit has ripened. Jeremy's added, as we evolve our viticulture, we learn more and have better balance earlier, better tannin development earlier. So that's another reason for picking a little bit earlier because we certainly don't want to see green tannins. We want the tannins to be nice and ripe, and we want the wine to have a roundness and a richness to it still. And that's what I was coming back to with this wine. So just on what this wine from 2020 smells and tastes like, and how that relates to the McIntyre Pinot as a genre. In 2020, I think this, as well as the red fruitedness, the thing that really kind of stands out from the beginning is a beautiful floral nose. And Jeremy and Jill and I think Richard does also like the darker characters in some of the darker fruited wines, but I think we all agree that this is a pretty special expression of McIntyre Pinot from 2020. And part of that is because of the brightness and the freshness of the fruit. So you've got this fresh red cherry fruit, but you've also got this beautiful floral array of aromatics, and it smells like rose petals, fresh rose petals, not potpourri, fresh rose petals from a perfumed rose garden. You know, you walk through Jill's garden at the height of its flowering season, and you can pick off pink petals and they smell like pink roses, and you can actually eat them and they taste of that smell. Black roses have a darker, more sort of voluptuous aroma, and there's a bit of that in here as well. So there's that lovely fresh rose petal character. Hello, John. How lovely to see you. Thank you. And I'm not ignoring your question, Craig. I will get there. The other floral characters that we're seeing, Mum was talking about an almond blossom character. We've got some almond trees that we never get fruit off in the driveway, but when they flower, they smell absolutely gorgeous. It's a really delicate floral aromatic. It's a white blossom, honeyed flower character, which is really, really gorgeous. It's also got a violet note, which gives it a bit more of that depth and weight. So yes, so Craig, the maceration, the winemaking is very similar to what we normally do. We do consider the year, the skin ratio, but prefer to let that year's characters shine through. And you're correct. It is compared to some of the McIntyres that we've had recently, and particularly the 17 and the 18 and the 19 as well. They were quite dark, quite structured Pinots. This is a little bit lighter and brighter in character. It's also younger. It will develop more. It will probably. There's no guarantees. It'll probably develop a little bit more weight with some bottle age, and this is part of the mystery of colour and weight and all of those things with Pinot Noir that Jeremy was just talking to me about this afternoon. He was showing the 2022 Pinots from barrel to our barrel merchant. He came by to say hi, and they were doing a barrel tasting. And hello, Anthony and Brigitte, how are you Monday? Is it sunny and lovely? Oh, gorgeous duck and mushroom risotto. Good work. Everyone's been very correct in following my food suggestions for this week, which is lovely. But the 2022 parcels of fruit that usually go to this wine, when we picked them and we made them into wine, they were quite light in colour as well, and we've kind of like, okay, that's 3 years in a row that they look quite light in colour. So they were doing a barrel tasting yesterday, and Jeremy's like, oh look, here's some of the 2022s, they're also light in colour, pulled them out of the barrel, and they put on colour hugely in the barrel. So there's this sort of this alchemy that happens with that very slow breathability of the wine while it's in the barrel, a little bit of ingress of oxygen and the tannins and all of the bits of the wine sort of mixing together. Sometimes you'll get colour developing more in the barrel. Sometimes the colour will stay quite pale like this and then develop in the bottle with bottle age. Sometimes it'll stay pale, and sometimes it'll get paler. So I think that we get a little bit hung up on colour, but I think that the flavour profile does, to a certain extent, reflect that lighter colour in this wine this year. And you'll see that again when we look at the 2021. No idea what's going to happen with the 2022 because we haven't blended it yet, and those wines are so young that we're not ready to make any calls about them. But yeah, I think that I think the thing that I find really interesting about this wine is that it is lighter in colour and it's got brighter fruit, but it's still got the classic McIntyre aroma and flavour profile and textural profile that I see in those darker wines as well. So it's quite structured. It's got quite a lot of tannin, and the tannin there, when you put it in your mouth, it's a little silkier than some of the darker, heavier McIntyre Pinots that we've made in the past, but it's still got that velvety texture to it. It's closer to the Robinson in the tannin shape and texture, but it's not the same. And we're going to do Robinson next week, so you're just going to have to kind of lock that into your memory and then come back to the Robinson next week to see if you can sort of remember those textures and see whether you agree with me. But for me, I always talk about the McIntyre as having velvety tannins, and I think that often when I'm thinking about velvet, I'm thinking about like really, thick, plush, crushed velvet curtains, or that sort of thing that you really kind of almost dig your fingers into and you can feel all that velvet. This is more like a satin velvet. It's sort of slipperier and silkier, but it's still got that really soft. I want to say fairy texture, which isn't right because it doesn't quite describe what I'm experiencing, but it does have that. It certainly has that that textural bite to it that the Robinson never gets. It's also got those herbal notes, both on the nose and on the palate. We're not missing out on those complexing sort of savoury things. There's still the wild sage. There's some rosemary. There's some thyme. There's a tiny little bit of wild mint in there. It's very, 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 very minuscule amounts. Just giving it a bit of lift. Okay, happy birthday. You're being very coy about that. I can't believe that the year's gone by so fast. Pizza and Duc Pinot for birthday drinks tonight. That's a pretty good way to go. Velvet texture, Anne, are you saying that that doesn't make sense to you, or that I think that the tannins are quite velvety, but really fine velvet, not like old fashioned velvet sofas or anything, more like cat's paws. I know I'm getting really weird, but cats have really velvety paws. And there's something about that texture that it reminds me of. Anyway, I'm going to stop talking about cat's paws because I can see you all looking at me as though I'm crazy. I've got COVID. It's okay. Shell, it's accentuating the mustard seeds in the dull. Beautiful. Yeah, so this is the amazing thing about this wine. It's got that lovely core of red fruit. It's got those lovely floral notes, but it's also got those earthy, spicy herbal notes as well, which work really well with a mildly spiced dish like a dal, and the earthiness of the lentils comes through really, really nicely with a wine like this, and brings out those sort of truffly kind of notes in the wine as well, which I think is pretty cool. I can see you, Craig. I can feel your facial expressions when I say things that are just a little bit too weird. Oh, that's good, Sid. I do think that having it open for a little while and just letting it open up and let it evolve is really important, which is why I chucked it in the decanter, but I'm still madly swirling. Beautiful, beautiful mouthfeel. The colour is quite different from the garden last week. You're right, Sid, as well. I think it's pretty good. It's really bright, and this is one of the things about 2020, and we talked about the vintage last week, I think. But just remembering that there's still lots and lots of talk amongst the wine industry folk about 2020 and the bushfires in late 2019 that sort of bled across to New Year's Eve in 2020, and the smoke that was around, and that there is a bit of smoke taint sort of floating around in some wines. And there were people who didn't make wine at all further north from here in northern Victoria, and also in around Canberra and New South Wales, just didn't make wine because of all the smoke. Down here on the peninsula, there was a little bit of smoke. There are still some people who are worried about smoke taint. I don't see smoke taint in the wines myself, but there might be people who are hypersensitive to it who might see a little bit. But I just think, for me, this wine has got this purity to it, which has got nothing to do with the warmth and the and what people remember that vintage for being. Sid, a lot of people are saying that it's an early drinking vintage, mainly because they're worried about smoke taint, because smoke taint gets worse in the glass, in the bottle as it ages. And so if there is any concern in a winery that there might be some smoke taint, then encouraging people to drink it early rather than putting it down is a really good idea, because the smoke taint will just make the wine bitterer and less pleasant to drink as it ages. I agree, Kay, this wine doesn't have smoke taint. There is an earthiness there in the, but it kind of, the florals come up. And William, how lovely to see you. You've got the chat going. Enjoying with the cheese and ham on board. Awesome. And welcome to Tasting Online. Your first tasting with us. It's great to have you here. Cheers. It's a great wine to start with, I've got to say, the old McIntyre Pinot Noir 2020. And Craig, I think that your point about the 2022 wines being released too early, it's really difficult. There's a huge number of people. I was just talking to other Mornington Peninsula producers yesterday about the fact that there was a big wine conference in Adelaide last week that Jeremy went to, and a lot of the talk was about the wine glut in Australia and how the big companies have got wine in tank that they can't sell because they can't sell it to China, and that was their main market. And there's all this wine sitting around that can't be sold. And unfortunately, they don't talk about what's happening in places like the Mornington Peninsula and Yarra Valley, where we've got sort of smaller, more boutique, higher quality producers who are making less wine at higher prices, who actually have got empty cellars. They can't keep up with demand. So there's this kind of two-track market in the Australian wine industry at the moment, that you've got lots and lots of people who haven't been able to make enough wine to keep up with demand, even over the shutdowns of the last 2 years. And then you've got the great big companies who've got like tank farms out in the middle of nowhere full of wine that they just don't have a market for, which is really sad and really difficult. But when you hear about a glut of wines and then you kind of go to your favourite producer and they're saying, oh, we've nearly sold out of our 20, our 21, and we're onto our 22. The 22 wines being released already, it's not, as you say, Craig, it's commerce, but it's also because the high-end producers, partly because a lot of people didn't make wine in 2020 because of the issues that we've just been talking about, a lot of regions. 2021 was a good vintage for a lot of people, but a relatively small vintage for quite a lot of people. So it kind of came and been and gone. We're really lucky to be in a position to still be selling 2020, just be starting to sell 2020s from our single vineyard range, and still have some beautiful 2018 estate Pinot Noir to sell. So you know, it's really, it's interesting times out there, and blanket statements don't do anyone any favors. So if you hear people saying, oh, there's a glut of wine out there, you shouldn't ever have to buy anything full price. It's, you know, it's all the wineries are, you know, can't sell it. There are wineries who can't sell their wine. But there's lots of other wineries who would like to have twice as much wine as they have been able to produce and be able to sell it. again and again. So it's tricky. It's tricky, and you guys understand quality, and that also helps as far as the selling of the wine. So I've been ignoring all of your comments. Kay, it is like walking through a garden. It's delicious. Nigel, all 3 single vineyard wines are silky, delicate, but savoury. Yeah, really beautiful early drinking wines. But I agree with Jeremy. Jeremy's just piped up with his 2 cents. This wine's far from an early drinking vintage. It's beautiful to drink right now, but it's got fantastic structure. It's got really good acid. It's got that brightness of fruit, which is going to evolve and develop, the depth of aroma. The fact that it keeps changing in the glass over the time that we're talking about it is a really good indicator that this wine is not going to fall over anytime soon. We're actually Jeremy's put it down in type that he reckons it's one of the best McIntyres we've made that he's tasted, and I think he's on a winner there. I think this is such a beautiful wine, and I don't think that I think that 5 to 8 years in the cellars is going to actually do really, really awesome things for this wine's evolution. But I think it's going to age for a lot longer than that. I think it's got all the classic structural qualities as well as that beautiful brightness of fruit that's going to mean that it's going to last and do really good things for quite a long time. Kay read an article today that you won't be able to buy a bottle of wine for under $20 due to small yield. Well, there probably will be those $20 bottles of wine. See, this is what I don't understand. The big companies that have got tanks full of wine, surely they could be putting it in bottle and selling it for super cheap. But, oh my God, Shell, did Boris Johnson, breaking news, Boris Johnson just resigned, finally. Cheers, Boris. We'll have a little illegal party for you. Poor thing. He really tried to hang on in there, but it's always good to have some breaking news during Drinks with Kate. The other thing that's very interesting, Jill says you're not paying enough attention to the wine, Shell. That's a comment from my mum, who's a little bit grumpy tonight. Have another glass of wine, Jill. I'll miss the hair too, Kay, absolutely. No, I was going to say that just talking about the UK, it's very interesting because they've also just signed, in March, we signed a free trade agreement with them, which means that there's less taxes on wine going into the UK than there ever was before, because obviously when they were part of the EU, we were on the same deal with the EU. Less paperwork. So I think there's going to be a lot more of this sort of quality wine going into the UK in the future. So it's another reason for you guys to make sure that the wines that you love, particularly, and this is not just Moorooduc, but of course Moorooduc, but things like we've talked about Clonakilla in the past, and their top Shiraz is still hard to get. Is already hard to get hold of these days, and he's one of the people who didn't make any wine in 2020. Those sort of wines, those wines that you love and that you've always bought and you buy direct from the winery and that you put in your cellar, make sure that you stay on those mailing lists and make sure that you get those wines in your cellar when you can, because there's more pressure on these kind of wines all the time. And I think for us who were never sort of trying to sell lots and lots of bulk wine to China, but working on the domestic market and the export market where people really appreciate high quality wines with character, those wines are getting out there in the world and are being sought after by more people as well. Now, Peter's there. Hello, Peter. Nice to see you. Yeah, I thought I'd missed a question. So Zach and Jack were asking, has the move away from cork changed the aging profile of your wines over time? Well, what the big move away from cork has done for us, Zach and Jack, is that it's meant that we never have cork tainted wine anymore, which means that if you are aging our wine, then you're not going to open a bottle 10 years after you bought it and have to tip it down the sink or put it in your risotto because it's got cork taint. So So that's a really positive thing. You get much more evenness of quality as the wine ages under screw cap. It maybe ages slightly more slowly than it would age under most corks, because most corks allow a little bit of ingress of oxygen, but the wines age beautifully under screw cap, and you don't need to lie them down because you don't need to keep the screw caps wet in the way that you need to keep corks wet. So screw cap just adds to the longevity and quality of the wine, in my opinion. Sid wants to know ideal food match with this. So I have to go back to what we matched to this wine at Jill's recent lunch, and that was her thrice cooked Maryland of Duck that she poaches in master stock and then pan fries and then roasts in the oven, which is to die for, and it's her own recipe. And she said the other day flippantly, oh, I must write that down sometimes so that, you know, when I die, you guys will still be able to make it. So I'm going to force her to teach me how to make it one of these days in the not too distant future. It's also fantastic with the other thing that we put with the thrice cooked leg of duck, which is a risotto. Sorry, not risotto. What am I talking about? Come on, brain. You can do this. Beetroot and potato mash with lots of butter and cream in it. Really, really delicious. And this is why I suggested that beetroot risotto, beetroot and duck risotto would be a fantastic match to this wine tonight. It also works really, really well, Sid, with a perfectly cooked steak and mushroom sauce. So, you know, it's pretty versatile wine. It's got enough structure, even though it looks like it's a light wine. It's got enough structure that it's going to handle quite full-bodied proteins. It's great with roast chicken too. So it can go either way. Like you can go with the more delicate side of it and go with the sort of the more white proteins. You can go with and I think the conversation about Shell and Andrew's dal, I think particularly red lentil dal, but also yellow lentils with a sort of a nice sort of earthy, not too hot spice mix can work really, really well with Pinot like this, because it brings out the earthy, spicy flavours of the wine as well, which I think is just gorgeous. Cotty, everyone's still waiting for Jill's cookbook. John wants to know when your cookbook's coming out, Jill. She said, right. What? Ah, the honey. Cotty and John, thank you so much for the honey. I forgot in my illness last week to thank you. Jill brought it over to me with a care package, and it is the most beautiful honey. Thank you very much. Feel very special to have some of that in my cupboard. Very, very cool. Craig, I'm rabbiting on and not answering questions properly. Craig, I have had some absolutely fabulous UK sparkling wine, as Jeremy has just pointed out. I think as it warms up, as the climate warms up, there's going to be some more interesting table wine coming out of the UK, but the sparkling wine already is very, very good. It's expensive. It's as expensive as buying champagne. They don't do that sort of, Australia does sort of mid-range priced sparkling really, really well, sort of $20 to $30 sparkling really, really well. And they don't do that in the UK. You know, it starts at sort of 40, 50, 60 pounds a bottle and goes up from there. But the wines are delightful. So yes, absolutely watch this space. Mostly southern UK and southern Wales as well. So there's some Welsh wineries doing some interesting things. Pinot Noir will probably be the next frontier in the UK as things warm up, but it's probably still just a little cool for really good, consistent table wine from Pinot Noir in that part of the world at the moment. But yeah, we just give it time. But the other thing about growing grapes and making wine in the UK is that land's extraordinarily expensive in the UK. It's very densely populated. farming is expensive, and growing grapes is a real kind of luxury option in the UK. So there's never going to be cheap wine made in the UK. There's never going to be sort of easily accessible wine made in the UK. So at the top level, absolutely. And there's a lot of there's a handful of champagne houses investing in the sparkling wine industry in the UK at the moment because, the chalk that they go on about in Champagne that's just under the topsoil that then goes down under the ground and goes under the English Channel. I was doing that stupid. My brain is very, very weird at the moment because of my language. I kept thinking La Manche. What's La Manche in English? It's such a wanker. But it goes under the English Channel and comes up as the White Cliffs of Dover, and goes into sort of the south of England. That chalk, which is really, really seen as being quite important for growing high quality fruit for sparkling wine. So the Champenoise are even sort of jumping on board with that. Even more expensive than Mornington Craig, smarty pants. We think Mornington wines are expensive. It's because we've got so much cheap wine being made and sold and drunk in Australia. You know, $50 for a bottle of really good Pinot Noir is cheap. $80 for a really good bottle of Pinot Noir is cheap. Go try and buy a bottle of Burgundy for anything like that, and it's just, or Pinot Noir from Central Otago, or Pinot Noir from North America, or we're very spoilt with our prices. As Peter and Karen point out, the tax system in Australia makes wine more expensive than it should be, and that's a bit sad. And those of us who make high quality, high priced wine would love for the tax system to go to volumetric tax, so that you're being taxed on the alcohol that you're drinking rather than the price of the bottle of the wine. And yes, Pete, I think he probably is talking about the cost of the land as well as the cost of the wine. And yes, land in the UK, farming, actually, that's a bit more difficult because you can pick up properties in the UK and in Europe in the countryside quite cheaply, because there's a lot more value in land in the cities in Europe and in the UK. But for growing grapes, then yes, even more expensive than vineyard land for the Mornington Peninsula. And you know, you talk about, and it's about how much land is available and is going to be appropriate for growing grapes. So anyway. And the cost of the wine is usually pretty closely associated with the cost of the land that you've had to buy to grow the grapes, and how much it costs to grow the grapes and all that sort of stuff. So it's all interrelated. Pete, by the way, if anyone was expecting a delivery from Peter this week, Pete now also has COVID. So, Pete, I hope you're feeling all right. How's your sense of smell and taste? Is it still there? Are you tasting wine, or are you just correcting me on things in the chat? It's still evolving. I think my nose is getting tired now. It does that quite easily. Still there. Good work. But I think, you know, this wine is such a beautiful example of wine from a vintage that could have been difficult for us. It was less difficult than we thought it might have been. I adore this wine, and I think that Jeremy's right that it's probably one of the best ducks that we've made, and it will live long and prosper in your cellars if you have the patience to put it down. Duc Pinot will cure COVID. Thanks, Nigel. Yes, Linda's on the chat, and she's just making sure that you know that if you were expecting a delivery from Pete, all of the deliveries went in the post this week. So it might take a little bit longer to get to you. I hope not too long. Hopefully Australia Post is getting their act together again. I'm going to leave it there. It's been lovely chatting to you guys. Next week, we're back again, and we're going to be finishing the triumvirate of 2020 single vineyard Pinots. We're going to be tasting the Robinson Pinot. I will do my best to come up with the perfect food and wine match for you, but you guys are getting very good at this yourselves as well. Thank you, Craig. I just saw your note. Yes, it is an absolute steal. We probably should put the price up, but, we're pretty generous here at Moorooduc. Enjoy the rest of your Duc Pinot. Oh, Emily, you got a Grand Cru wine fridge delivered yesterday. How exciting! Yes, you do absolutely. Now you've got a little wine fridge, then a bit of cellaring is very much in order. I will see you all again next week. Take care. Enjoy the rest of your Pinot. Love this wine. Love you all. And nobody's made any comments about my earrings, which are not hamburgers. They're little chocolate stuffed French pastries, if anyone wanted to know. So there you go. Cheers, everyone. Take care, and I'll see you next week.